All right, welcome back to the Shatkin First Down Buffalo Pre-Game show. Rich Gaenzler with a great friend of mine from the Buffalo News, Jay Skurski, joins us. Jay, great to see you, man. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Rich. Happy holidays to you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. You have been on the Bills beat. What year is this for you? You've been doing it a long time now, man. You're a young man still, but you've been doing it a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I even predate the Buffalo News. My first job at the Niagara Gazette, I covered them. I can go back to remembering being in press conferences with Mike Mularkey. So that, that ages me, I think, an adequate amount. So yeah, however long it's been since Mularkey has been the coach here, that's how long I've been around in some form or another, either at the Niagara Gazette or now with the Buffalo News.
Well, the next segment of the show, we get members of the Mafia, just fans around a round table. And part of that segment is we ask them trivia questions. And one of those trivia questions might be about a head coach that you covered who not only coached the Bills, but also coached the Bears. That's sort of the interesting twist of this weekend. Anyway, don't name him. Don't name him because you'll give it away. You know who I'm talking about, though. All right, so let's talk some Bills. You've covered them a long time, obviously. You've been around the bad. Now you've been around the really good. And I'll wrap up our Q&A with how good is this particular playoff team. But let's get back to the Miami game first. Man, I'll tell you what, Josh picked a great game to be great.
He certainly did, and they needed all 4 of those touchdowns and all 77 of those rushing yards, all 304 of those passing yards. You hate to see come out of a game feeling like it's a one-man show, but it was hard not to after that game. I mean, he looked like, and I wrote it in the paper the next day, he looked like the best player on the planet that night. And we had seen performances like that from him early in this season. Sort of got away from that maybe a little in the middle of the season. You wonder how much the elbow injury impacted that, but when they needed him most, and Saturday night was certainly a case of needing him most, boy, did he deliver. And he just likes playing against the Dolphins. I mean, 10 career appearances now, 8-2. Both of the losses have been sort of right there at the end, and just the numbers are sort of dizzying. But yeah, when the Dolphins are the opponent, it just seems to bring out the best in Josh Allen.
Well, and think about too, the losses this year all by themselves for the Bills have been tight as well. I mean, they're blowout wins, they're close wins, or they're really close losses for this team, which is super impressive. I was really impressed, and I don't think it got mentioned enough with the fact that the Bills, despite what they were dealing with, especially on their offensive line, especially in the second half, they were so impressive in terms of drives in that game, right? They had 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 15 play, 75 plus yard drives in that game.
Yeah, absolutely. Better on third down, much better on third down than they were against the Jets. It was 2 of 13 against New York, which was a season low. And they were up around 50%. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but much, much better against Miami. And that led to, I think it was 29 first downs. So they were staying on the field. They were, and you look at that last drive, right? The drive to end the game covers almost 6 minutes, 86 yards, a couple of key third down conversions early in that drive to stay on the field. And that's what you're looking for. And, you go back to that New York game, and the key to staying on the field and converting on third down is being better on first and second. And I thought they were many times. They weren't in as many negative situations, not as many penalties, although there's still some issues there to clean up. This was not a perfect game by any stretch. And certainly, you look at the offensive performance in the third quarter with 4 punts. They went through a bit of a lull there, but I do think there was a lot to build on from this game, particularly when you go back to that New York game. And again, the amount of struggles that they had offensively, I think they fixed a lot of those issues. Not to say they fixed all of them, but I think they fixed a lot of them against Miami.
The Dolphins, it's so interesting to me. And I just thought about this the other day, and like after we had played the game, and now we played 2 of them against Mike McDaniel, but like when they show the Dolphins, it's always Mike McDaniel. Like I couldn't tell you who their defensive coordinator is. Yeah. And I think that's a problem for Miami because in my opinion, I think that's a really good group individually. They have a lot of really good athletes on that defense, but seemingly whether it's scheme or coaching, they just don't get it done on a consistent enough basis. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think, if you look at their defense and levels, they make a big move for Bradley Chubb from Denver at the trade deadline. And everything that I've read has said they basically overpaid, number one, and that 2, they haven't gotten the production that they hoped that they would get out of Bradley Chubb to this point. And, you go out to get him. He's the closer, right? He's supposed to be that Von Miller type. his former teammate with the Broncos, meaning that guy that gets you over the hump in games like this, in big games against elite quarterbacks. You need him being around the quarterback a lot more than I thought that he was. But I agree with you. There's individual talent. I mean, Christian Wilkins is a real good player. I like Jalen Phillips. I think he's been playing well. Another issue, though, I think is in their secondary. Xavier Howard has not played to the Pro Bowl standard that he's sort of set before. And then Byron Jones, a big money free agent that they spent to sign away from Dallas a couple of years ago, has been hurt most of this season, didn't play against the Bills, and nobody really knows when he's going to be back. And I've never really been impressed with their linebackers either. So I feel like they are missing sort of those pieces in the middle. When you look at the Bills, you contrast that to what they have with Milano and Edmonds. I don't think Miami has anything like that at linebacker. So those are some of the issues they're dealing with defensively. The weird thing is, too, if you look at their splits home and away, they've been a very good defensive team at home. They've been atrocious on the road. So I don't know what that's about, but I don't know if that's a coaching thing or a mindset thing, but there is some weird things going on there where they're a much different team defensively on the road.
Let's swing it back to the Bills now. And I mentioned the offensive line, and they have issues, obviously. Mitch Morse with the 6th concussion. Bates is banged up. And then injuries aside, and we'll talk about the injuries in particular because Butker's coming back now, whether he plays or not. And I'll get your opinion and your know-how and your gut on whether or not that happens and who is that front five. But penalties, as you mentioned, have been a problem. It was 2 games ago, it was Dawkins. This past game, it was Saffold. They have got to clean that up. And then again, to my previous point, what do you think the offensive line is going to look like on Saturday?
Well, it's tough to know right now with Mitch Morse being in concussion protocol. We don't get a lot of updates on his status. I would say that I believe the plan will be, if he can't play and Ryan Bates can make it back in. It was a good sign that he was limited at Tuesday's practice. We'll see how the rest of the week goes. I think that Ryan Bates would be your starting center. Then the question becomes, and you mentioned it there, they activate Ike Butker. It's been a calendar year, basically. December 26th of last year, he got hurt. This game going to be played on Christmas Eve. So we're almost talking 1 full calendar year since he's been on the field. I think it's a lot to ask to expect him to step in and play anywhere from 50 to 75 snaps, whatever the game calls for. But can they rotate him in, maybe with Greg Van Roten, who we saw start at guard in place of Bates and then move over to center after Morse was hurt. So I think they are going to have some moving pieces here up front. The good thing is that, they do have some continuity at tackle with Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. We know those 2 guys are going to be out there. Saffold is an issue, right? He has taken a lot of penalties. I don't know that his play really the entirety of this season has been what they really hoped that they would get. And, when you sign, I believe he was 34 at the start of the season, may have turned 35 now. So there's a bit of a risk there, right? When you bring in a guy like that. But yeah, if you're talking about the line play as a whole, I think it's been an issue for this team. And I think if Morse is to miss any significant amount of time, and let's be honest, right, his health right now has to be the number 1 priority. Given his lengthy concussion history, you have to make sure that he is, 100% obviously and comfortable going back on the field. But without him, he has been the glue. And Josh Allen referred to him as sort of the heartbeat of that offensive line. It could be a big issue both against the Bears and the rest of the season.
Yeah. I mean, I think we would all admit that Josh has probably covered up a lot of those issues up front for sure.
No doubt. With his mobility, that's absolutely
his improv
right.
plays.
How many sacks does he get away from just by being able to scramble?
Yeah, for sure. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Let's stay on the offense. Beasley and Brown and Shakir, by the way, who seemingly was in the game a lot, I thought, this past week against the Dolphins, but I don't think he was targeted. I don't think he had a catch. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's fine. They're making use of other guys, whether it was Morris or whether it was Hines or Cook, whoever. But I was interested to see that Shakir was used. He was in the mix. Beasley did get out there, had the 1 catch. Brown not out there at all. What do you make of those 3 and their future over the next couple games, then going into the playoffs?
Yeah, so with Brown, you're right. He was not called up from the practice squad this time because he already has been twice. They can only call him up once more and then send him down without him having to clear waivers. Now, I don't think that they're totally worried about him clearing waivers, but I think when you get to the end of the regular season, that resets. It goes away entirely, and you can call up anybody from the practice squad an unlimited amount of times. Now, of course, with a limit of 2 per game. So I wonder if there potentially were maybe just saving that last call up for John Brown. They do elevate Cole Beasley. You're right. Not a lot of snaps. I believe it was around 10 or 11 in the game. That's to be expected, right? Hasn't played meaningful football here in more than 2 months, going back to early October with Tampa. So I think they're working him in slowly. But if you're asking me of those three guys, I would expect by the end of the year that we see Beasley playing the most and playing a defined role, and that's as a slot receiver. That's something that they could not replace after they lost him. They hoped they had it in Isaiah McKenzie. He turned out to not exactly be that type of player. I think Khalil Shakir is not ready for that role. I think we can determine that the Bills feel that he's not ready for that role based on his usage to this point. They've just not asked him to do that. And this is a team that, they feel they're close, and I'm sure we'll get to that and what their playoff projections look like. But the reason that you make a move for Cole Beasley is because you feel like you didn't have that answer on your roster prior to making that move. So I would expect that as Beasley gets into better shape here, gets into game shape, that we're going to see more of him, and we're going to see a very defined role for him.
There has been a common theme here over the last few minutes. Butker out a year, comes back, talking about Beasley coming back. Trey White has been back. What do you make of his play? Obviously, there were some significant plays in the Miami game where you thought, man, it's not the Trey I know, on the Hill touchdown, on the one Waddle play as well. What do you make so far of Trey and his return?
Yeah, so the analytics would tell you, if you go by that he was thrown at 9 times against Miami, allowed 3 catches, but they were pretty big, 67 yards, and one of them was a touchdown, right? So, we heard from Tre'Davious White after the game. He has been very media shy since he's been back, only talked a couple of times. Each time, though, he has talked about how it has been a long road back for him, and he's not where he wants to be, quite frankly. Those are his words, not mine. So, the good news is that he is, from a physical standpoint, able to handle more and more. It's now 2 straight games where he's played 100% of the defensive snaps. Is he back to the all-pro, first team, Pro Bowl Tre'Davious White that we have known before the knee injury? I would say no, and he would also tell you no. So the good news, though, again, is that you would expect that he continues to build up and gets more comfortable being on the field with each passing week. So you want him ready for whenever that first playoff game, be it the wild card round or the divisional round, depending on where this season goes. That's when you want him to be as close to 100% as possible. He's still got 3 weeks to get there. You don't want to overlook anything, but obviously that game in Cincinnati here on Monday Night Football in a couple of weeks looms very large in this playoff race.
Yeah, and Trey White at 75% is likely better or as good as whoever they have on the field as it is as we speak. So let me ask you this. So you've covered all the playoff teams, obviously, and you've covered the divisional championship teams and all of that over the last 6 years. Where would you rank this team? And I'll preface the questions by saying this: if nothing else, this team has done more with less than probably all the other ones.
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing that I think we are struggling with here, when I say we, I mean collectively as a community almost, is these sky high expectations that this team had coming into the season. And not every game is going to be 35-0, right? And I think I'm sensing a lot of anger on social media, quite frankly. I don't know what better word to use for it when things aren't going perfect or aren't going really even according to plan. And I get it, but I do think that we have to take a step back, take a breath, and say, listen, they're 11-3. They're atop the AFC. They've played, I want to say, the toughest schedule in the NFL. If not,
yes, that's right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So they've played the toughest schedule in the NFL. They've lost 3 games by a combined 8 points. One of those games they lost in absolutely hilarious fashion that you'd almost never lose again, and that being the Minnesota game, right? So I do think that they have overcome a good deal of adversity. Now, that being said, no one can look at the way this team is performing right now and look at the way that this team, or last year's team, which is, obviously made up of many similar parts, at this point in the season is performing, and not say that last year's team was rolling at a better clip than this one, right? I think certainly offensively they were hitting on every cylinder, whereas right now it feels like offensively for this team, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Week in and week out, it's a little tougher. Defensively, no Micah Hyde and no Von Miller this year. Those are big absences. And I know Von Miller wasn't there last year, but neither was Tre'Davious White, right? So maybe those, kind of cancel each other out. So I think the remaining 3 games for this team, now that we know that they've gotten the playoffs sewn up, which we expected, are massive. And the reason why I think though that is because the number 1 seed in the AFC this year, this is the year you want it. I mean, more than last year, more than almost any other year that I can think of. And the reason being is not only do you get that bye, which is huge, not only do you have home field advantage, it also means that you eliminate the path that could potentially have you having to play Cincinnati and Kansas City, who I think for my money are the 2 second and third best teams, however you want to rank those 3, right? If you have them going, if you have the Bills getting the number 1 seed, they only have to face one of those teams, Cincinnati or Kansas City. And I think that's a massive carrot to dangle out in front of the Bills. It's why the number 1 seed to me is so critically important.
And lastly, I know people are all caught up in the fact that, the Bears only lost to the Eagles by 5 points and they played them tough, and Fields has 1,000 yards rushing as a quarterback. But let's face it, the Bears, I know people will use the any given Sunday, but come on. I mean, the Bears just top to bottom stink. Fields is what he is, but man, he just does not have very much complimentary, roster spots around him. I mean, Montgomery's a nice running back. Claypool's banged up, so he's not available. And the other receivers, Komet's not been much of anything. They have no receivers over 40 catches. So what do you make of the Bears? This should be, you would think, certainly on paper, this should be an easy win.
Yeah, I think it should be a comfortable win. I mean, you have to avoid Justin Fields sort of running wild and having just one of those crazy games on the ground where it's over 150 yards or something like that. I think with Milano and Edmonds in the lineup, that should be relatively easy to avoid it. I think offensively, the Bills enjoy advantages across the board against the Chicago defense. And you're right. I don't think that Chicago's skill players outside of Justin Fields' running ability really strikes fear in almost any defense. So yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to think that this is a game that the Bills should go in. This is one of those ones that you want to see a 35-10, 35-17 type of a game, a comfortable win to prepare you for the game of the year against Cincinnati. Not to say you're overlooking Chicago, but you don't want this thing coming into the late third, early fourth quarter still being a game. You want to, heck, you'd like to have Josh Allen on the bench in the fourth quarter for this game to keep him healthy, rest that elbow as much as possible, and get ready for the final 2-game stretch.
Could you imagine if for whatever reason the game ended up at some point being Josh Allen against Nathan Peterman?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I could imagine if Matt Milano gets a free shot on Justin Fields the way that he did against Mike White a couple of weeks ago. And obviously, I'm certainly not rooting for an injury to any quarterback, and Justin Fields has been great for the NFL. But I mean, you're right. It's one play away from Nathan Peterman, and what a storyline that would be, right? Nathan Peterman against Sean McDermott, the guy who named him a starter in 2018 in the Buffalo Bills. I think a lot of Bills fans would sign up to see a Nathan Peterman appearance, and maybe and obviously they'd be rooting for a redo of the 5 interception half that we all were able to witness out in Los Angeles.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, listen, man. Happy holidays to you and your lovely wife and your son. Obviously, who's continuing to crush it. If people don't know, your son Elliot where is he ranked in the country for his age group?
He's 4th. He finished 4th in the national tournament and back in June, and we got another one coming up in February, actually the week after the Super Bowl. So we're busy practicing for that, and we're hoping to improve on that 4th place finish and move up a couple ranks.
I want to see him on the Masters version of punt, pass, and kick, whatever the heck they call that. But,
the drive, chip, and putt. Yeah, we're angling for that too. That's I'm trying to ride his coattails right to Augusta. So
awesome,
that's what we're hopeful.
Awesome, man. Well, again, happy holidays to all you guys. Thanks for doing this. And obviously read everything that Jay Skurski does in the Buffalo News on his coverage of the Bills, and get to Chicago safe if you get
we'll
there.
See. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Rich.
All right, man. Thank you. There's Jay Skurski from the Buffalo News. The Shatkin First Down Buffalo pregame show continues with more right after this.